the way that he tackles people being woken up at different eras of humanity is really fascinating, and that's a really interesting way of conveying the sheer shock of just being like jolted out, almost like time travel, essentially, just popped into another moment in the zeitgeist where everything's slightly different. Morality is different, values are different, people are slightly different, language is different. It's a really
like going to France.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
Started during lockdown, needed something to do. They looked at each other, they said, hey, I like talking to you. And so from a garden shed in a box room in West London, they're discussing tech. It's the Small Time Bets podcast.
I went to a thing today. You'd like it. Actually, I don't know if you would. It's called Frameless. It's in Marble Arch.
Why wouldn't I not like it?
And it's an immersive art experience. So they take paintings, like Canaletto's painting of the San Marco Square Piazza in Venice, or Van Gogh's The Starry Night. And then they put it in a room, projecting it onto each wall so that you feel that you're immersed in it. And they play sounds at you.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
They might, in the case of the Venice Piazza, they 3D, like they turn it into a 3D thing, so it's scrolling past you slightly and moving in parallax.
That's really cool.
And
you have to duck as painterly pigeons to try and
well, so in the impressionist room, the flakes of paint, the paintings fall apart, and the dabs of paint end up all on the floor, and you can run through them.
Okay, that's really cool. I feel like I would like that.
And then they scatter as you run through.
That is interesting. Is that a temporary exhibit?
No, it used to be a multiplex cinema, and then site, I think, View or Cinemax or someone refused the site, and then it was up for, it could only be kind of given over to this sort of thing. So
that's quite cool. I feel like that's taking art from the old world and bringing it into the modern era, because you get a lot of those sort of things in like the Tate Modern, where they're experiential exhibits, but obviously they're created in the last like decade or two, whereas this is interesting to take it from like the old classics.
I imagine it won't always be this, like I guess the thing will always be frameless and immersive art experience, but it won't always be with this work.
That's cool. So we need to just remind people, follow on Twitter, please leave a review. I left us a review. I gave us 5 stars.
Well done.
Maybe I should have been more critical. And feel free to check out the YouTube channel and the merch store. Anyway, lots to cover. Can we start with the market update?
Yes. Would you like to hear about this week in the markets and crypto?
Yes, because in fact, in the last few days, it feels like it's just been chaos.
In the markets, things went down a little bit, but I think it's being distorted by tech. And if you look at overall, things are slightly up, actually. So because of earnings at Meta and Google and Microsoft and Amazon all being below expectations, even Amazon saying that we're in uncharted waters on consumer spending. Uncharted waters. So because of that, the tech firms lost their value. In some cases, quite a lot. Meta lost 24% of its value this week. Amazon lost 13. But losing a quarter of your value in 1 week is a big deal. That was Meta. And then the only exception to that was Apple. Oh, does Apple go up? Apple didn't do as badly because having made 90 billion in Q3 and their target was 89. So... Okay. They beat their earnings target despite supply constraints on the 14 Pro and the Pro Max, and despite effectively forfeiting 10% or 12 billion in foreign exchange because of the strong dollar. Okay. So they finished the week up 10%. That's fair enough. So the story goes like this. You've got the tech giants just being hit really badly, except Apple. And then overall, the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq are up 4% and 2% this week overall. So it looks like if you're holding tech stock. It looks like a horrible, horrible, terrible, no good week. But actually, overall, the stock market is up. In crypto, Bitcoin's up 6%, Ethereum's up 20% this week. So ETH is at $1,600, and Bitcoin is at nearly $21,000, up from $19K at the start of the week. And that was this week in crypto and the markets.
Okay, there's an interesting segue between the two. This week, Musk completed the buyout of Twitter. And have you seen what happened to Dogecoin as a result?
What did happen?
It's like 3x'd.
Oh, really? Oh, good news for Doges.
On the basis of, it's the meme coin, and now there's always
because
the chance that
Elon's been saying it could be the X app.
Yeah, so I guess
the everything app. So Twitter could
there.
become, if Twitter becomes the everything app, by which he means WeChat, and it's useful for, booking taxis, paying at restaurants, everything that WeChat is used for. So like becoming like a multi-merchant storefront. And he's talked about using cryptocurrency. And in fact, didn't CZ also from Binance say that he's proud to be one of the investors backing Musk's takeover of Twitter and looks forward to,
CZ's one of the investors. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Looks forward to more cryptocurrency integrations with Twitter. So if you believe, if you see that through line, you could be like, therefore goods for Doge.
Fair enough.
Because the deal with WeChat is that it's got payments integrated into it. And Elon has always, since the days of when PayPal was supposed to be called X, he's always dreamed of having
he wants a company and an app called X. He's very...
Yeah, but he's always dreamed of having more than payments. Like, payments was just the means to have the everything app.
Yeah.
Now he's getting to do potentially a pull-through into an everything app.
We'll see how that goes.
The right place to start on an everything app is messaging, because it's frequency of use plus social graph.
Yeah.
It's not the right place to start is
It's
Twitter.
whether the right place to start, is Twitter. Exactly.
Because it's not a messaging app. I don't know how often super users are... Power users must be opening Twitter very frequently, but the vast majority of Twitter users is not opening Twitter as often as the vast majority of WhatsApp users.
10% of Twitter users are responsible for 90% of Twitter content and ad revenue. So it is very much dominated by
any content-based platform,
but not messenger applications, which is a difference, right? It's a different type of model. Meta's an interesting one. So we talked about Meta last time, and it feels like they're down 70% from their recent highs, maybe more, 75% or something by now. And Google was down, and Google's reason was
down because
poor
of
ad revenue from YouTube. Amazon down because of consumer demand. And I'm sticking with my thesis from last week, which was these are leading indicators that consumer demand is drying up. Consumers just aren't spending as much anymore. Advertisers aren't paying as much to advertise to consumers. Ad revenue is down. Consumption is down from Amazon. Forward-looking statement suggests it's going to get even worse. Those all suggest that the things that drive inflation are probably starting to die out. And I think inflation will, having gone up like a hockey stick, I think it will suddenly peak and drop. And then the interesting thing will be central bank reactions. It does feel like some big changes are afoot.
You still need to be bearish because you're saying the recession is here, it's upon us.
Oh yeah,
So
no, I'm not saying
massive downturn in consumer
yeah.
demand and consumer spending, which the Amazon figures point to. The Google one, you're surprising me. You're saying that the main part of the ad revenue downturn was on YouTube.
Yeah, apparently.
So it's not linked to ID for advertiser.
No, apparently it's to YouTube. But I mean, if you think about it, advertisers wanting to spend less on ads is generally a signal that there's less consumer spending. Right? So
Facebook is getting hammered for Zuck's Meta rebrand and the turn to the metaverse.
And they also had
is that a distraction?
Loss in ad revenue,
is
right?
it all... So my question is...
compounding it.
Is the fact that that's the narrative a distraction? Like, is what's really going on... Yeah, sure, they lost some money by investing in metaverse type stuff. But what's really going on, what's driving the poor earnings is
that
fall off in ad revenue.
Yeah. And also the fact that they were... The Apple iOS change to... What's it called? The ID for advertisers has really
so that's
hit them.
Yeah. But
and it's
not
starting to...
Google as badly?
Well, if you think Google still has like the homepage for Google and they still have Android phones and they still have so many other channels, whereas I think Facebook, no one's going to facebook.com. Let's be honest. I think it's a very different model they needed to piggyback from apps. So they're slightly more susceptible to it, and they don't have their strategy at the moment seems to be the metaverse play, which people aren't buying, investors aren't really thinking is a good revenue stream. However, as we discussed last week, I think say Meta starts continuing to crater for the next year, there is going to be a point where I think their R&D and their research into this space has a lot of valuable IP. You know what I was really surprised by?
Yeah.
McDonald's and Pepsi at all-time highs. Like, we talk about like Amazon's down, Facebook's down, Netflix is down, Nike are down, Disney are down, Tesla are down. But all-time highs, yeah, McDonald's and Pepsi are absolutely crushing it. I don't have any comment other than that. I found it quite fascinating.
Yeah.
It's really hard to like, and actually I hadn't quite appreciated how successful a business McDonald's is. So since 1988, McDonald's is 11,000% up. They have been just absolutely crushing it for decades, and they are continuing to. And yeah, even with a global downturn and recession looming, cheap fast food seems to still be something people need. So yeah, remarkable.
Slightly different model in McDonald's, isn't it? Because
Well-
they own the land, and then they
True. I mean, it's the land and then the franchising, but
provide
the
IP
franchises still
and
need
franchising.
to succeed. So yeah, there's still something working there.
You know who's really successful in that space, like in terms of revenue per square meter, is Chick-fil-A.
Really?
Yeah, Chick-fil-A have been just
Because they have really small shops, or I don't know. I've never been to a Chick-fil-A. Like, I had to sit.
the throughput, the revenue that they make per square meter.
Wow.
It's, let's say it's four times greater than their next best competitor in the restaurant space.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of insane. Can I ask you a little bit about a very strange topic?
Let's do this.
Right. So I wanted to talk to you about transhumanism tech,
Yeah.
as you do. You know,
Yeah.
just for fun. What is transhumanism? I hear you ask.
No, you know what? I'm just confirming that it's true that Chick-fil-A make more per square meter than anyone else. You know, because the average Chick-fil-A unit store makes 4 million, which compares to 2.6 for McDonald's, or just under 1 for Starbucks. So it's considerable how well Chick-fil-A throughput. They're just a revenue machine. Back to you. Transhumanism. I'm really sorry. People put stuff on themselves, in themselves. They are turning into something that is slightly more than human.
I guess so. It's kind of been around for a while, but this whole blanket term is more or less a school of thought now. It's not like an organization runs it. It's just a movement. I mean, you know, like there's like humanist ideals of like focusing on humanity and the prosperity of the human species and not really looking at religion and everything else, but like, you know, how you make a better quality existence for humans. Transhumanism tries to go beyond that to not accept that human beings need to have limitations such as like death or disease or other frailties, that actually we have the ability to somehow go past all of those things. So it covers everything from sort of like space migration, cybernetics and uploading your brain, cryonics so that you can freeze your body essentially and then be brought back in some stage in the future. It covers longevity science, so anything that's anti-aging or age prolonging, gene therapy, CRISPR, microbiome research, wearables and ingestibles, things that you like eat to like monitor you. It's quite a deep and weird topic, and it has everything from like the fringe, very biohacker type people who are just like experimenting on their own bodies, all the way through to other like mainstream scientists who are just trying to make people live longer. But I thought it's a really interesting area of tech that we haven't ever spoken about, and probably doesn't get a lot of media coverage, to be honest.
Does it make sense to group it all into one term?
No, I don't think all those naturally, like CRISPR doesn't mean it's a transhumanist technology. I mean, it's more that the movement and the school of thought that the human species can go beyond its evolved limitations to actually have complete control over the future of the species is the idea. And then it just happens that all these technologies do feed into it, and that people are trying to just experiment with them. And it's not just billionaires, it's also just, some of it is like the microbiome stuff is, I mean, do you know what the whole like fecal transplant concepts are?
Yeah. Turns out that if you change the bacteria living in your gut, you might transform radically from a very irritable person into the most benevolent, radiantly healthy, kind person that you never knew you could be.
Yeah, so there's people experimenting with that through essentially what is a poop transplant. It's like you take the bacteria from someone else's healthy gut and you transplant it into your own gut by just swallowing a pill. But people are experimenting with that and actually finding really remarkable results, because it can be far more effective than a lot of drugs and steroids and other forms of much more invasive and damaging things. So there's things like that. And then there's other things where people are genuinely just hacking themselves, like gene therapy and other things that are just probably a little bit more fringe and need a lot more research. But it's a really fascinating area.
The first thing in your list was interplanetary migration.
Mm-hmm.
That's transhumanism too.
It falls into it. So there's an organisation called Humanity Plus who really try and assemble the minds and thinkers in this space to have a newsletter and a website and various events and stuff. But space migration is an interesting one, because to do that properly, firstly you need things like cryonics. You need to be able to like freeze the human body in stasis so that you can then travel for long distances for tens of thousands of years and then reanimate that human being and they're back. So essentially time travel to the future. So you need to have technology like that. But also if you're moving in a space environment, you have all sorts of other things you have to deal with around longevity and bone density and low gravity and all these things that require you to think about human longevity and how you can make the human body tailored to a completely different atmosphere and environment. So yeah, it falls into that as well. It's really interesting.
What's your entry point into this?
It's a bit hard, but Humanity Plus is like an interesting site and organisation to look at because they have a lot of resources, although you might get a bit freaked out at the fringe sides of that community because they will start talking about like uploading your brain into a computer and, the Neuralink type implants that go straight into your brain and connect you to make you more cyborg. Another simpler area would be to read a book called Hacking Darwin by Jamie Metzl. Very interesting. He's a biologist who studies like gene therapy and genetics and CRISPR and everything, but is much more of a proponent around longevity sciences. So it talks about a lot of the supplements and molecules that are being looked at that essentially prevent the body from like aging. You know how DNA degrades and telomeres break off and you're like aging is just poorly copying your DNA time and time again. And there are many supplements that in other mammals have incredible, can increase their lifespan by like 30-40%. And so he talks about how you're going to see that start to become more mainstream. And that book, it does enter the science, but also covers a bit more of the societal aspect. Like, is it going to be millionaires and billionaires living forever and everyone else is just screwed? Or is it going to be an arms race between countries where at a central planning level, you basically make your populace just better than other countries, and that they live longer and they're stronger and they're more resilient to certain diseases, those type of things. So he does cover those interesting points. I would start with that book, probably.
Hacking Darwin.
And if you want to think like, what's the future of life and humanity beyond, into space travel and everything else, I think Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark is just a really fascinating book. And the first third of that does cover the human species and where that could go. Yeah.
I mean, a science fiction take on pretty much the similar sort of strain of ideas is the Culture series by Iain M Banks. I'm just getting to the end of the 10-part series. So the idea overlap includes humans are uploading their minds into computers, the advance of AI until society is governed by computers, people modifying their bodies genetically and through other means to be able to switch gender at will, to gland chemical drugs and stimulants at various points, and a world of infinite plenty, a point that's been reached in society and civilization whereby there really isn't conflict because there's almost limitless resource available and limitless energy, and planets called orbitals are manufactured, which are rings.
Cool.
So there's unlimited living space, essentially. And the culture is the description of a central grouping of pan-humanoid life forms that have come together to form a society in which this abundance exists. So lots of things stem from that basis. People all often wear neural laces, which is part of what allows them to be backed up continuously. It also allows them to have the communication with the AIs and the data that's available when and where you need it. So yeah, it's the Culture series by Iain M Banks, seminal science fiction sort of master. It's a profound work because of the world that he creates, and then very diligently colours in. Having done the broad brushstrokes of that, he then articulates out what that would mean for something very basic and what the consequences would be as you inhabited that world.
That's really cool. I need to read that. I've never read any Iain M Banks before. And
It's the same guy. It's the same guy. It's the same. It's Iain Banks. And all he's done is he's put an M in the middle of his...
I've never read any Iain Banks then. Maybe I should have clarified.
Same guy from the Wasp Factory. All he's done is put an initial in his middle of his name.
I'm in need of another.
And he uses that
series
persona to write science fiction and not horror.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I see.
Yeah, so it's not thriller horror genre. He steps out into science fiction, and that's how you know is because he's put an initial in the middle
That's
of his
really
name.
Interesting. That is really fascinating. So yeah, a few good books. There's also, and it's not transhumanism, but it's just an interesting, if you're very scientific, there's a podcast called Huberman Lab, where Professor Huberman, he's a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. So each week he's talking about like different things to do with like how the brain works, or the impact of nicotine on your body, or caffeine, or certain drugs, or even like hormones or workouts, everything. And he has a whole series of them on things like longevity and the latest research going into what particular molecules do. So it's very interesting, a bit heavy and deep, but if you want to go kind of scientific into it, his podcasts are very interesting and thorough. Imagine like Joe Rogan, but actually like really with academic chops with every sentence, but the similar type of like format in terms of him and speakers, and they're talking about really interesting topics, but extremely knowledgeable and deep. That's another good area to look at.
Yeah, in the culture, when people live for 400 years or so, they tend to, go through the life phases and then, gradually kind of wind up their life. They might go into suspension with instructions to wake them up the next time there's something major happening, or they might choose to sort of bow out. But I think if you took entire population, and made them live 30 or 40% longer, obviously, in today's world, with today's economics, you'd have a massive problem with supporting your pension plans, right? So the working age population, you'd need huge inward migration.
Everything, yeah.
And the consequences of inward migration is like a lot of political pushback. So it'd be a real problem. You've got basically looking at what Japan is like, with a low birth rate and aging population, and if you haven't sorted out your automation by that point, you really ought not to be allowing people to instantaneously extend their life by 30 to 40%. It's a time bomb.
Yeah, I mean, this is the interesting thing about in that Hacking Darwin, when he goes into the sociological impacts, it gets quite interesting, because at the moment your assumption is that the human population will kind of peak and plateau around 10 billion, and then it will start to lower. Obviously, if pockets of people start living indefinitely, that doesn't really work. But then again, at that point, you probably think, oh, actually, are we an interplanetary species? And to be an interplanetary species, you do need to have people who can live much longer, and cryonics that can allow you to be in suspended animation for very long periods of time and then be, like you said, woken up and reanimated for, repair this thing and then go back and then pop up. Have you ever read like the 3-Body Problem series?
Yeah.
So the Remembrance of Earth Past by Cixin Liu. There's the way that he tackles people being woken up at different eras of humanity is really fascinating, and that's a really interesting way of conveying the sheer shock of just being like jolted out, almost like time travel, essentially, just popped into another moment in the zeitgeist where everything's slightly different. Morality is different, values are different, people are slightly different, language is different. It's a really
like going to France.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
But anyway, I've really enjoyed that because I think it's an area that I'm researching more at the moment, and we haven't gone into like what's the investments and innovation that's happening in that space. But I think at a future date, maybe we could, because I do think there's some very interesting things that are going to be huge breakthroughs in that space once they get to a point of like, FDA approval and mainstream approvals of some of these technologies. You can see the adoption.
But even before that, like the fringe people who are doing mods, body mods of, like the kind of people who have piercings. Piercings were alarming, and edgy 30 years ago, 20 years ago, much less so. And 10 years ago, it's like we're now at the point where you could implant and mod useful things into your body. So... And
you can do things like 23andMe with a subscription where you're constantly getting updated on like the latest research that's tailored to you. I don't think...
So wearing like a wearable, like an Oura ring, or like whatever the equivalent piercing thing would be for an Apple Watch, you can imagine that becoming... There should already be a fringe community that's experimenting with that stuff and who never unplug because they don't need to. They induction charge their mod. And what is that, feeding them, and then what kind of life experience changes that? And if you're in a community that's really kind of pushing the boundaries on that, well, what are your values, I guess, it'd be interesting to learn about that particular subreddit.
Yeah, actually, there probably is like a ton of subreddits on this sort of stuff. Humanity Plus is where I'd go for those. There's plenty of stories of people who are really taking it into their own hands and experimenting.
Great stuff. All right.
Do you have a not a sponsor for us?
Yes, I do. This week's not a sponsor is the partnership between Amazon and their portfolio investment, Deliveroo.
Ooh.
Which means that if you're an Amazon Prime customer, you can get free Deliveroo Plus.
What?
So you should go into your Deliveroo app and link it to your Amazon account, and then you'll have a year's free Deliveroo Plus, which means free delivery upon hitting a minimum order that varies upon the restaurant. It's a good thing to know about. You might not have known about this, but if you are an Amazon Prime customer, which invariably you are, or someone in your household is, then make sure you link your Deliveroo app to Amazon, and you can have free Deliveroo Plus, which might make your delivery free. So that's this week's not a sponsor. It's a relationship between Amazon and their portfolio investment into Deliveroo.
I'm doing it now. I did not know this.
Yeah, so they have a 16% stake in Deliveroo, is my understanding. Possibly more.
Oh my God, I just got Deliveroo Plus for free. This is amazing. Thank you for that. That's a fantastic...
You're very welcome. That was
sponsor.
This week's not a sponsor.
I think it's time for This Week in Crypto.
This Week in Crypto, Web3 infrastructure.
Oh yeah, so I wanted to talk to you about this because we dive too deep into crypto and price and everything else. But actually, when better to talk about Web3 infrastructure than when we're in a massive bear market and crypto winter? Why would it be important for us to talk about this from your perspective?
Why is it important to talk about the infrastructure of Web3? Just in general? Well, for the same reasons that Web3 is important, because we were trying to get away from a centralized internet controlled by tech giants.
And it's really hard to do that at the moment when you can do it at like one level of financial abstraction, which is kind of the Bitcoin level. But then, as we've seen time and time again, further down the technology stack, if you're just relying on Google or Amazon or anyone else to just host your stuff, you're not really taking control over that and decentralizing it fully. And I wanted to talk about what you need in the Web3 stack and why it's important. From my perspective, it's really interesting because you've got like this growth of the internet that we've seen has exacerbated the levels of inequality that we see in society, where you've kind of got business models at play that mean shareholder capitalism, people who own a stake in the big companies that run the internet, is really where all the value is, and users and content creators and everything don't really get that. And it made me think about the equivalent of this would be if you go back to kind of like the Karl Marx idea of owning the means of production. I feel like the reason Web3 infrastructure is so important is because you need content creators and users to own the internet so that you get fairer, more equitable distribution of internet money, of the economy. And so that they own not only the internet itself, but also their own data and their content, which at the moment you don't. If you post things on Instagram or Twitter or anything, you do not own that stuff. That just gets monetized on your behalf, and that money doesn't go to you, it goes to the shareholders. So you kind of have there's a need to move every part of the stack into the domain of users, where users can actually play a part in governance and have a share of the income and own the technology that they're using. That's what I think anyway.
Feels like you're articulating something that's both kind of obvious, but maybe new at the same time.
I think a lot of people don't realise how most of it isn't new. It's just we take it for granted that it's not in our control. So like, I'll start, I've got a list of things working through the kind of web infrastructure stack. One of them, which I know you know a lot more about, is around data and content. So getting away from just storing it on AWS S3 buckets and into Filecoin, IPFS, Arweave, Seacoin. There's quite a lot out there actually that do storage.
So various protocols that allow for decentralized storage of data. I remember when I think it was Julian Assange was talking about the possibility of having documents exist in a way that could never be blocked, a totally decentralized way of hosting something such that it could never be shut down. And when he was talking about that originally, I think 10 years ago, it sounded really far-fetched. But we have that now. We have the ability to take some data and put it in the public domain or a select domain and have it such that no matter what happens, as long as there's some computing power left on Earth that is connected to this thing, this protocol, you will always be able to find that document. And that document could be the Constitution of the United States, or it could be the lease, the title to the plot of land that you happen to live on, or it could be a problematic document as relates to treatment of the Uyghurs in China. It could be any number of those things. And what you know now is that we have a technology so that you can't destroy that document. Who cared this much about documents before? Not that many people, but it turns out that there are some documents that you could care about, and it's now possible to have them be kind of immortal, which is a good thing. Obviously, if there's a really powerful solar flare, or if the Earth is destroyed, well done, you did destroy that document. But I think at that point, you've lost a lot more.
True. So the data storage thing is a really interesting one, because you need that in the Web3 stack at its core, just because that's really what people are trying to find, right? Content, videos, emails, documents, anything like that. But as we've seen with Tornado Cash, and we've seen with other more controversial entities like with Parler and with areas where it broaches into kind of free speech, those things can very quickly unindex you and you just disappear. So you think you can't be forgotten for the internet, but it turns out you can actually if you're on the wrong side of the public consensus. So indexing that stuff is really interesting, which is how you find that stuff. There's things like the Graph, which is like API indexing, which is all decentralized, and there's other options now to find the content, which is really useful. So you saw with Tornado Cash how quickly GitHub deleted an entire developer's live history even though it wasn't in breach of sanctions, it was just a collateral damage. It turns out now it's really important to have that stored somewhere that's secure. And incidentally, the Tornado Cash one's interesting because the community, which I think is only a dozen people really, of active people they've moved everything up to decentralized file storage. They're hosting everything on like a decentralized version of Discord. And they have their own version of GitHub, basically, that's linked to IPFS, so that none of the source code now is going to basically be just deleted and removed by GitHub like it was. But as I was going through the whole like web stack, it started becoming apparent that it is happening, but like far slower than people realize. I think, long story short, the media movement to like, oh, Web3's around the corner, is very much focused on like Ethereum or metaverse things or NFTs. And then the media criticism is, oh, it's actually all owned by venture capital and Web2 corporations and stuff. There is actually the longer term view that all these things are being built out where you as a user, you can own and govern that actual infrastructure. And that's what's different about it, right? You can actually be part of the person hosting the data in a distributed manner. You can run nodes that basically replicate API indexing to make sure that it's not going to get censored by China or censored by different regimes based on the times. And you can even host source code. If it's really essential source code that you're worried could get deleted or removed, that can be hosted as well. So it's all these different ways of participating in it, which I think is really important at this stage. To wrap it up, I wanted to ask, have you heard of GreenPill?
No, haven't. What is GreenPill?
So it's a podcast and a book, and it's an initiative funded by the Bankless chaps. Mm-hmm. But it was set up by the founder of Gitcoin. And it's really interesting because it's very much about like Web3 and crypto and all the great innovation happening. But the focus is about community-driven public good, or crypto for public good. And it has a weirdly like left-wing ideology. You know how crypto tends to lean more right-wing? This whole movement is more around fair distribution, things being more equitable. How can you find ways of making an internet that is open to all, very equitable in terms of the power structure and the economics? And also, how can you fund and make available projects that really are in the interests of supporting everyone? Essentially like the roads of the internet, who funds them, who maintains them, how does it all get built out? Really cool podcast series and a great book that is worth looking at, because I think this whole what's in the Web3 stack thing for me, it came down to kind of imagining a version of the internet where you as a user actually get to not just click around and like, you know, play games on it, but like own part of it, be responsible for like running some of it, and then also profiting from it without having to hold shares in Google or shares in Amazon or something. You're profiting from it by running hardware or essentially validating that certain content is correct and legitimate and everything else. So I think it's a really interesting movement. I think it will be something that people more on the left wing of politics might go, oh, actually, maybe there's an element of this whole crypto Web3 movement that I could get behind ideologically, you know? Anyway, just a thought.
How does one get from a world in which AWS is the most terrifically cost-optimized global resource with superb documentation, an incredible feature set, and the most robust global infrastructure, to a world where some of this other stuff exists and is widely used? Because it seems like for most people, most of the time, the problem of stuff being shut down is a really edge case, right? And I know that when they came for Tornado Cash, I said nothing. They did not come for me. Like, I get it. I get that there is a creeping, chilling effect here when they came for the GitHub of one particular developer who had happened to have worked. They did not come for me. I said nothing. Like, I get that. But at the same time, most people, most of the time, and especially in a business context, are going to be choosing AWS because that edge case of, oh, it's censorship resistant. It's like,
I don't think it's just all of
me.
No, but I think you're putting way too much emphasis on censorship resistance.
So wait, because I have to finish the thought. So then you have to make a broader case, right? Of okay, well, this isn't just about that edge case. This is fundamentally better because of its ethos, or because it's fairer, or because this was the internet we originally intended to build. And I just don't think that's going to be enough for a lot of people. I think it's almost like you have to do the hearts and minds thing that the environmental movement did. It's almost like trying to get people to stop drinking milk. People are stopping drinking milk, but you had to do so much groundwork. You had to convince them, first of all, that there is such a thing as the environment, that it's at risk, that cows have something to do with something, and that there's a morality thing, and loads of just so much groundwork. So essentially, to get people to use Web3 infrastructure when they're perfectly happy with AWS, you would have to persuade them that there is such a thing as, I don't know, the right way of rewarding YouTube influencers. Like, honestly, I don't think that the way that you framed it in this episode has been a slightly different pitch, right? Other times you've come at it from this angle. Today you came at it from this is about workers owning the means of production. In a way, it's about a more equitable internet. It's censorship resistant, sure, but this is now, you've changed the argument slightly, it's more equitable. How do we get to a point where the Web3 infrastructure makes sense because of two people, like people find it compelling, because of that argument?
So the YouTube argument's a really interesting one. I think it's going to be in these like narrow use case where it's really popular and simple to explain. So the YouTube one's a good one. Have you heard of Odyssey? Odyssey with two E's at the end, so it's spelt wrong.
No.
Runs on the library blockchain, LBRY. Anyway, long story short is a lot of big YouTubers, really big YouTubers, have moved across to Odyssey. It's essentially a replica of YouTube, but
without the viewers. Magic.
They've got some massive YouTubers who are basically just putting stuff on YouTube and putting stuff on Odyssey. Because in Odyssey you can be tipped. You get paid based on the views and based on the ad revenue that comes through directly to you. So it's not kind of the weird 50% of whatever's left over that you get on YouTube. But also, once you're on that, there's almost an incentive if you're a content creator to run a node and be part of the network, because you also, by running a node and shoring up the overall network, you're essentially running part of that internet infrastructure, and you earn the revenue from running that piece of equipment the same way that you would if you were just running, I don't know, some AWS server. So you see there's a weird like incentive to participate if you're a content creator. And at the moment, I think that's like, it's a narrow, simple, understandable model, which is basically it's YouTube, but like you said, without the viewers, but it's owned and managed and run by the community who run it. It's all open source software. The Odyssey platform's built on top. Imagine that being WhatsApp. Imagine that being a few apps on your phone that essentially start to become nodes and part of the internet infrastructure, running on your phone, generating income because of the participation and the security you add into the network. And then when you create content and post it, you literally are getting the cuts from ad revenue or NFT sales or royalties or whatever the model is for that particular app ecosystem. I think that's probably the broader scale use case where people go, oh, actually, that's obviously the thing I want to do because it's the fairer way of getting paid for what I need. I think we're like decades away from it, but the building blocks to get there are the things that I just talked about today in terms of domains and content storage and block explorers and distributed AIs and indexing and all of those things. At every level, you're going to have people write them, run them, secure them, build on top of them, but they're not hosted by central big tech. They're hosted by people in a distributed fashion. And those people, ultimately, for it to succeed, will have to be the users. It will have to be users and content creators who are willing to also own the means of production and profit from it, because that's where it will be. It will work, and it will be most efficient and probably most valuable too.
Thank you very much. So this week in NFTs, Reddit they did some NFTs, didn't they? They had 4 of them, and they were just like incredibly expensive. And everyone was like, why on earth are you doing this for NFTs? That was nearly a year ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago. What were those ones called again? They were like
The 3D one.
Yeah.
There was the
and
one
they
that
were one of
looks
ones. They were
like a
really
mirror.
special. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was one
There's one
that was very shiny,
disco
like
ball.
a mirror ball.
Yeah. I remember.
And then there was another one. And it was astonishing how expensive they were. And they said at the time, we have no plans to do any others, but if you did this and you linked it to your wallet, you could make it your avatar. Everyone would be impressed with you. However, it's gone further.
It has. Have you followed it? What
And
do you
they're
think?
now 3 of the top 10, according to some article, but it's not true. 3 of the top 10 most volumed NFTs on OpenSea from the past week. And so these are NFTs that can be used as your avatar in Reddit. Is that right?
Yeah, in the same way
And
that
there's a bunch of different collections. The Halloween one is trend. Is
that one
doing-
trending now?
It is actually in the top 7, let's say, from the last 7 days. But yeah, I mean, they seem
How
to
many
have a
did
lot of
they
volume, and they're actually
launch?
their platform. The weirdest statistic that I've heard is that Reddit as an NFT platform has more people using it as an NFT platform than OpenSea has as an NFT
Oh,
platform.
really? That's interesting.
So everyone already has a snoo that they've personalized because they got
Yeah.
airdropped a snoo when they upgraded the avatars. So everyone already has now got like a new generation snoo, and then
But not like a special
but those
one.
aren't NFTs.
No.
So with the NFT you can get an even better snoo. It will glow. I think it has a glow animation. It has a glow animation, and it can then you can trade it as well if you wanted to.
And it runs on Polygon, right?
It runs on Polygon. This whole thing's on Polygon.
The whole thing is on Polygon. Yeah, because I mean, if it ran on Ethereum, it would just be like absolutely mad gas fees. They've got, it's 3
3 million users, yes.
million.
3 million people
That's
have set
insane.
up vaults. A vault is a wallet.
But that's insane. That's actually like, that's a
How
lot
many
of
people use OpenSea? Less than that.
Like 10,000. Like actual people. Actual people. 10,000 unique
currently
people
has
with a pulse.
2.3 million active users.
Active wallets, of which there are 10,000 people. Yeah,
Nice.
I'm kind
Nicely
of
done.
blown away by it.
Reddit
because
came out of nowhere and just
but you know,
astonishingly
if this had
managed to get a
happened-
lot of people in NFT land in the middle of an NFT bear market. Let's say that.
right, and but that's the thing. If this had happened, I don't know, let's say just like this time last year, or like
People like
NFT
profile pictures.
summer. This is
People really
mad.
like the killer use case. The killer app for NFTs is profile pictures. Never stopped being. Never wasn't.
whenever I'm on Reddit now, I just see more and more people with the fun with the fun hexagon thing, especially in like the comments and things. You'll see more and more people who have it, but it looks really. It's interesting. They've all gone with hexagons though, right? They've all gone with the hexagon motif. But then, yeah, when you click on it, I don't know whether you get. Does it animate? I'm looking at someone's now.
I think there's meant to be an info panel on the back of it. You can tell its characteristics.
Oh, you can. That's really cool. But it's kind of weird because unlike other profile pictures, they're all exactly the same structure. It's like imagine CryptoPunks but with 3 million variations.
And there's like different classes, like
Right.
epic and like legendary is the one of one.
Interestingly, there's so many people using these on Reddit because I think when they first got launched, they were like $10 all the way through to like $100, and now some of those things are selling for like tens of thousands of dollars. And it's the same weird nuts mindset of
It's just coming. It's
all other NFT balls.
so weird to see a bubble within a crashed bubble, like a new bubble,
But you know, it must be
but
months ago.
doing the exact same thing as the other bubble was doing, with the exact same way of thinking, the exact same dynamics.
I don't have them to hand, but some great threads on Twitter about this, where it was people basically saying what will happen is all the people who are like, oh, NFTs are rubbish and they're stupid, on Reddit will now have got a snoo and realise it's really worth loads, and then they'll go and they'll sell it on OpenSea, and then they'll be like, oh, NFTs are amazing. And you've just onboarded them into like a MetaMask wallet and Ethereum and everything else.
But they did this whole thing without saying the word NFT once.
Yeah, no. It's actually, in fact, they don't even use the term PFP. It's just collectible avatar, right? That's it. So it's kind of genius.
Avatar. Why didn't we say collectible avatar?
I don't know. And it's in the Reddit collectible avatar marketplace. And it's like, wow, that's super clever that they didn't even bother using these annoying terms. I suspect this is one of those things that maybe in like a year's time, like the shockwave from this will start to lay the groundwork for the next set of 3 million people who get onboarded into having a Web3 wallet, having ownership over something, a digital thing they own that's actually transferable and that isn't just locked within the Reddit world. Because Reddit have had coins and various badges for ages, right? But you can't take them out and do anything with them. Whereas theoretically, you could make this your Twitter profile picture.
That is interesting, isn't it? That is interesting. You could. Yeah, and it would also be hexagonal.
And
that's actually quite cool.
We were talking a while ago of like, what is the...
You could make it your Instagram one as well.
Right? Yeah, but we were talking about like Reddit versus Discord, and like which one is more well placed to be like the town square or like the Web3 equivalent of a town square. And none of us were thinking Twitter would actually be the place for that, but maybe Reddit will be. Maybe Elon should have bought Reddit. It would have just been so much better. And Reddit doesn't have any problems with content moderation.
It's a better policed, higher quality version.
Much better place. It's a really cool story.
Jonathan, what are we talking about next week?
What do you want to talk about next week?
It says TBC.
I'm not sure, actually. I haven't really thought it through.
Right, okay, brilliant. Well, that's great. That's a great way to tie up the podcast. The section of the podcast where I say to you, what are we talking about next week? And you go, what would you like to talk about? That's a really good way to tie it up. It's a nice, high-energy way to close out the podcast. I really like it. Jonathan, it's been a great pod. Thank you. Talk to you next week.
Started during lockdown, needed something to do. They looked at each other, they said, hey, I like talking to you. And so, from a garden shed in a box room in West London,